The Florida housing market is experiencing some big changes right now. In today's video, I'm going to share all the details. So for example, the amount of houses for sale in the state of Florida this July is at its highest level in nearly 6 years. The highest amount of houses for sale for any month since early 2019. In contrast though, on the demand side, pending home sales for the month of July are at the lowest levels for the month of July, going back to at least 2016. And on top of that, pending home sales are flat compared to 1 year ago. So inventory up greatly, yet contracts being signed between buyers and sellers is relatively flat year over year. Now here's what the Florida realtors had to say regarding inventory levels for single-family houses, and I'll share my own insights regarding this.
The inventory of single-family homes continues to rise, but over the last 3 months, this growth has slowed as each month has passed. I'd caution, however, that this slowdown may be in part just a seasonal effect. Notice that from 2014 through 2019, statewide single-family inventory levels generally declined in the summer months, with 2018 as the one exception. Remember that in late 2018, we saw 5% mortgage rates. That sure seemed high back then, but right now it's looking pretty good.
He's right. I mean, 5% rates, that was because of back in, for the most part, 2018, we had about 4% rates. And by the time we hit November that year, rates increased to a staggering 5%. Here we are at 6% or around 6.4% right now. So one thing that I want to mention that you guys can clearly see here is that for the month of July, regarding the amount of houses for sale statewide, was the highest levels in several years. So for example, it's higher than 2015 through 2023. The only year in the past 10 years that we had more houses for sale was back in 2014. Therefore, inventory levels this July is the highest levels in about 10 years for that particular month. Absolutely insane. But it is true that inventory tends to peak around the summer months, around June. Then it decreases for the remainder of the year. And also it tends to peak around January or December. So I want to bring this to your attention right away because inventory is absolutely exploding in Florida. Yet we're seeing a decrease in pending home sales. In fact, pending home sales are at the lowest levels for the month of July since at least July of 2016. So supply rising and pending home sales basically going down. So I have a lot more to share in today's video. Let's talk about closed home sales. This is a lag indication of our housing market in Florida because this is based on a closed home sale, right? This is more what our housing market was like in Florida about 1 or 2 months ago when the home buyer got their offer accepted. So that for the month of July, there was 23,353 closed home sales. That is an increase of 5.2% compared to July of 2023. It's also an improvement from the previous month. Back then, we saw a giant decrease of 11.1% year over year. It's also an improvement from 1 year ago. Back then, closed home sales decreased by 6.4% compared to July of 2022. However, though, we're well below 2019 though. So for example, there was around 28,000 closed home sales for the month of July back in 2019. Therefore, we're down by about 18% compared to pre-COVID levels. All right, let's change gears slightly here and talk about the percentage of cash sales for the state. For the month of July, the share was around 26.4%. So around a quarter of all closed home sales this July came from an all cash buyer in which the buyer did not use a loan to buy the house. That's at 26.4. Something I found to be interesting is this right here. This is the lowest share going back to the year of 2020. In my personal opinion, this is likely from a decrease in rates that we saw ever since June, which likely caused the decrease in the share of cash sales as well. In other words, when rates decrease, that makes it less attractive to buy a house using all cash. All right, let's talk about home prices. And by the way, today's video is only talking about single family houses. So the median sale price this July, just under $417,000. That's a small gain of 0.5% year over year. And part of that growth rate, by the way, is from a significant increase of multi-million dollar properties that sold, or houses over $1 million, which I'll share with you guys here in a little bit. But at $417,000, that's a decrease compared to the previous month at $427,000. It is normal, entirely normal to see prices or the median sale price decrease around this time of year. But this year is actually a little bit more pronounced due to rising inventory levels and, of course, due to housing affordability constraints from elevated rates and, of course, elevated prices as well. Something I found to be interesting as well, and I looked at their data going back to January of 2016, the year-over-year increase, a gain of 0.5%, is the smallest gain since June of 2023. So in other words, prices are still going up, but not the same rate as years past or months past. Also, despite a softening home price growth, the increase in prices over the past several years has been absolutely staggering, to say the least. So for example, the median sale price back in July of 2019 was only $268,000, and now this July it increased to $417,000. Therefore, prices have increased a whopping 56% ever since 2019. So in other words, I don't expect to see buyers rejoicing that home prices only increased by 0.5% from 12 months ago, given the fact we saw a giant increase up by 56% over the past 5 years. All right, let's change gears slightly here and talk about the sale price to original list price received. And I'll explain this. So this July, that ratio was at 96.3%. This means for all the houses that did close this month, they sold for 3.7 percentage points less than the seller's original asking price. This is actually a lower share compared to 1 year ago. Back in July last year, that share was at 97.7%. In other words, houses selling about 2.3 percentage points less than asking about 1 year ago. Also, check this out. Let's talk about how fast or how slow houses are selling. Some huge changes compared to the past couple of years, for example. So the time it took to, when you list your home for sale until you accept an offer from home buyer, that was at 37 days this July, a giant increase of 54.2% from 12 months ago, on top of the 100% gains we saw 1 year ago. So to provide some context here, the all-time record low was only at 8 days back in June of 2021. Back then, homes selling about 1 week. Now they're selling selling in about 1 month's time. Therefore, homes are taking about 5 times longer to sell right now compared to June of 2021. Also, the all-time record high for data that goes back to January of 2016 was set back in February of 16, when days in the market was at around 58 days. I will say though that days in the market does have some seasonality to it. So days in the market tends to be high during the winter months and of course lower during the spring home buying season. But given the surge of days in the market over the past couple of years is absolutely astounding. Just look at the graph below here. Back in June 2021, days in the market at 8 days, and around 8 days back in April of 22 as well. Then it surged by the time we hit February of 2023 to about 43 days. So days in the market absolutely skyrocketed in 2022. Whereas this year, it's relatively flat over the past several months. So big picture, we don't have this shock of our housing market like we saw in 22, given that houses were selling much slower compared to the start of this year. This year, of course, much different. But of course, we have still a lot of challenges ahead as well. All right, let's talk about the demand side of the equation. Then we'll talk about how that compares to the supply side. A big imbalance here. So new pending home sales, a measure of contracts being signed between buyers and sellers for the month of July, was at 23,255, a small decrease down by 0.6%. But based on my nerdy analysis here, this marks the fewest amount of pending home sales for the month of July since at least July of 2016. In other words, during the same time frame, the month of July, we're at least an 8-year low. Also, have a look at this. I looked at the report from about 4 years ago here. Look at July of 2019. New pending home sales, 28,242. Now, there's less than 24,000. What's wild about this is this right here. New supply hitting the market, the amount of people who are listing their houses for sale, that rose by 11%, 10.7% to be exact. Also, this is on par with pre-COVID levels as well. Back in July of 2019, there was approximately 31,000 new listings. Also, there was around 30,000 back in July 16, 17, as well as 2018. So the amount of new supply hitting the market on par with pre-COVID levels. In contrast, new contracts being signed between buyers and sellers at very low levels. In regards to the amount of houses actually for sale this July, it increased by 59.4%. There was 97,634 single-family houses for sale this July. By my nerdy analysis here, that's the highest amount of houses for sale for any month since early 2019. That is remarkable given that inventory tends to peak in the winter months. And here we are in July, and we have the highest amount of houses for sale for any month since early 2019. Big picture, we have this big imbalance between supply and demand. On the supply side, we have supply at nearly a 6-year high. In contrast, pending home sales are flat compared to 1 year ago, and also the fewest amount of pending home sales for the month of July since at least July of 2016. And of course, one of the reasons why we're seeing a big increase of supply is, of course, a lack of sales, but of course, houses taking longer to sell as well. Let's also discuss the month supply as well, because this July, it increased to 4.6 months. 1 year ago, the month supply was only at 2.8 months, so it has increased by 64.3%. Now, this is pretty wild here because last month, which is tied from this July at 4.6 months, that is a all-time record high for data, again, that goes back to January of 2016. So at 4.6 months, the highest levels for any month since at least January 2016. Also, just for fun, look at the graph below here, which goes back through January of 2020. Look at 2022, February to be exact. The month supply was less than 1 month. So let's just say it's probably around 0.9 months supply. Now it's at 4.6 months. A big increase over the past several years, to say the least. Let's also talk about closed home sales by price range. And remember, I said that the growth rate in the median sale price for the state as a whole is being supported by more expensive properties that are selling. So for example, this July, for houses that sold for over $1 million, that increased by 12.2%. The only price tier that increased by more than 10%. In other words, we're seeing more sales of more expensive properties and less sales of more affordable properties, which of course, that mix in sales is helping support overall the median sale price in Florida. So for example, we saw a gain of 12.2% for sales over $1 million. In contrast, we saw sales only increasing by 3.7% in the range of 150 to 200,000, and in the range of 100,000 to 150,000, a small gain of 4.7%. Small gains in the more affordable price tiers and more expensive properties selling more compared to 1 year ago. Here's something absolutely wild as well. We're seeing basically a lack of distressed home sales in Florida though this July. So for example, traditional home sales, which are defined by any sale that is not a distressed home sale. So any sale that's not a foreclosure or a short sale, there was over 23,000 this July, yet only 152 foreclosures and only 42 short sales. This means that a whopping 99% of all home sales this July came from a regular sale, and only 1% came from a distressed home sale, either a foreclosure or a short sale. So basically a lack of distressed properties being sold right now. If you guys follow my YouTube channel, you guys all know how I say that real estate is local. So let's have a look at the larger metro areas in Florida to see how they fare, because of course, there's some very big differences. So for the state as a whole, sales increased by 5.2% from 12 months ago. In the Cape Coral, Fort Myers metro area, there was around 1,200 closed home sales. That was the biggest year-over-year increase, up by 9.1%. the biggest year-over-year increase among the biggest metros in Florida. In Daytona Beach, Florida, we saw sales decrease by 1.8%. And again, I'm going to be focusing on the bigger metro areas that have at least 1,000 close home sales. Jacksonville, Florida, it increased by 6%. Lakeland, Winter Haven, up by 5.6%. And the Miami metro area, the greater Miami area, there was 3,313 close home sales, and sales increased by 6%. By the way, because that metro area is so big compared to other metros in the state of Florida, that's a main driver regarding the statewide averages as well, because there's a big amount of sales in that area compared to these other metro areas. Having said that, their median sale price increased by 6.1%. That was the biggest increase among the larger metro areas in the state. In stark contrast, look at Cape Coral, Florida and Fort Myers. Home prices decreased by 5.3%, which is right there. Daytona Beach, Florida, basically flat year over year, and down by 1.2% in Lakeland, Winter Haven as well. Let's take a look at this. Northport, Sarasota, Florida, 1,300 close home sales. Sales increased by 5.6%, yet home prices decreased by 7.2% year over year. That was the largest decline among these largest metros. Also in the Orlando metro area, sales increased by 1% and prices rose by 1.8%. You can see these other smaller metros, some big changes here. Also in the greater Tampa area, 3,600 close home sales, actually higher compared to Miami at 3,300. Sales increased by 4.5%, yet prices are flat year over year. With that said, please comment below your biggest takeaways from today's video. If you guys got any value out of today's video, this video took me hours to make because of all the research involved, then please hit the like button. Also, consider subscribing as well. I post frequent housing market updates so you guys can be more informed. With that said, I appreciate you guys so much for watching today's video and for supporting my YouTube channel. Have an amazing day and look forward to seeing you on the next video.